Hello and welcome back to Read Becca for another weekly chatty catch-up on what I read, what I'm currently reading, and what I'm looking forward to reading for the week. I'm slightly scooted over so that Ripley can guest host. She's currently providing moral support. So I had a decent reading week. I felt a little slow on my reading, but yet I finished a few things. So it was a very fun reading week, I think, or at least this weekend has been fun because it is garbaugust wasted weekend. It's not August, obviously, but this is the midpoint between garbaugusts, and so Criminale put on the wasted weekend to give us a little reminder of reading trash. So I did read some trash, but let's start with the non-trash, I guess. So what I finished this week, a nonfiction on audio, was Matt Parker's Humble Pie, P-I, A Comedy of Math's Errors. And this was such a great book. It was really entertaining. It's kind of a collection of topics about math errors, as it says. And you do kind of have to be a little bit of a nerd going into this. There's a whole section on databasing errors. Not everyone is going to have any interest at all in that. But it also includes things like financial markets and algorithmic trading errors, which is directly correlates to my job. Many of these are situations that happened since I have been in my career, so I have personal experience with these situations and was affected by them in some way. He does even mention an error involving a company I worked with, but he said the company name wrong. That kind of irked me. He repeatedly said Thomas rather than Thompson, which are very different things, but I will let it go. Otherwise, this was so entertaining and easy to fly through. I was somewhat worried about doing this on audio because it is a book full of numbers. Obviously, I'm not going to be sitting there doing the math and checking his work. I'm not doing that, but having the numbers thrown at me did not faze me at all. It was very easy to consume and understand in the audio, and the author was a great narrator, super entertaining. So I had a fun time with this. It also had some kind of heavier and harder hitting topics, some things that involved fatalities. Airplanes and spacecraft disasters and why those went wrong, where the checks and balances failed. And so I felt like this actually was very applicable to me in my job, because thinking about how things can go wrong and how we can prevent things from going wrong is very much part of my job. And so this was both fun and hilarious at times and really applicable to how I think about math problems. So I enjoyed this so much. It also was sort of influenced by BookTube. I had already picked this up from the library, but a couple of books, a favorite booktuber of mine, long-term, who's been around for years, just returned from a lengthy hiatus and did a catch-up of favorites of the year from last year, and this was one of the favorites mentioned. So in between my having picked it up and by actually getting to reading it, I got a good recommendation for it being fantastic, and it totally lived up to a couple of books recommendation. So that was a really fun one. And then my second very fun pick was specifically for garbaugust, and that was No Good Deed by Ardwolf. This is a fan fiction. It is the second in a Firefly, Star Trek The Next Generation crossover. So the first story I read last year, I think for Book Trek, I don't recall, it may have been for garbaugust, but it was for a readathon last year, and that one is called Lost in the Forest. In that one, we're actually experiencing the crossover, where Captain Picard's crew on the Enterprise and the Firefly, or the Serenity crew, meet up, and they're in the Firefly universe due to some trouble started by Q, who is kind of a trickster character in the Star Trek universe. This one is them both operating in their separate universes, so there's no longer really a crossover element, but they're dealing with the fallout of what happened in the first story. And this was great. I really enjoyed it. So the Star Trek story, I think, was the more compelling of the two, because we are getting a literal courtroom drama. There's a lot of discussion about what happened in the first story, and the first story was really caught up, for the Star Trek side, on decisions about the Prime Directive and how much to reveal to a more primitive spacefaring civilization, along with some really critical problems. And in the Firefly story here, we're dealing with fallout of things in that world as a result of the Star Trek folks having been there and the situation that they dealt with there. And we're also dealing with the usual Firefly story, which is the crew being hired for a job and them realizing a lot of things are wrong with this job. And so that is such a fun thing that engages very much with what we expect from those two universes and their storytelling. And yeah, I just really had a fun time with this. This gives us the characters we love, it gives us the type of stories we love, and it mashes up two universes I really enjoyed. So I just had a really good time with this. It was fun. I devoured it all entirely yesterday, Saturday, and I couldn't put it down, basically. So So that was super fun. And that's what I read this week. I have been reading a lot. Mainly I have been focused on Exordia. I have not made as much progress as I wanted to. This is hard to explain. I will get to explaining it next week when I finish it, I'm sure, but it's not hard to read. It feels very dense without, like, there's nothing difficult there. It's quite readable, but it's taking me super long to read. So I don't know. We'll get to it once I finish. But I progressed that. I progressed a little bit of Master and Margarita. This is also super dense to read, but super entertaining. So it's weird that I'm having both books be like that at this point. I also made some progress on one of the books I had on my TBR, Mr. Hotshot CEO by Jackie Lau, which is both for Valentine's Day, and I think it also fits as a garbaugust picked for this weekend. So I'm going to try to finish that today or tomorrow for the garbaugust wasted weekend. And unsurprisingly, I mentioned that Jackie Lau is always a hit for me pretty much, and she is someone I would trust to deal with this trashy premise, and she has not done me wrong, I don't think. So I'm a good way into it and really, really enjoying it. What else am I reading? I haven't picked up a new audiobook, so I will need to go find a new audiobook and start that. I'm trying to prioritize nonfiction. However, my goal was one nonfiction audio borrow from the library per month, and I've already done that. That was my humble pie. So I could open it up to something else, but I don't know if I will. We'll see. So other than that, I think that's it for reading stuff. Watching, what did I didn't finish any shows. I finished Survivor season 5. I had sort of stalled out, and then I finally came back and watched the last couple episodes of season 5. I've been slowly watching the old seasons of Survivor from the beginning, just as my falling asleep sort of watch, and it's interesting because the first 4 seasons, we didn't really see the private conversations and the backstabbing and maneuvering between people very much on camera. So when there were betrayals, you saw them and like witnessed them happen at Tribal Council. Season 5, we have finally started actually seeing all of that behind the scenes backstabbing and drama going on in the private conversations. I'm assuming a lot of that has to do with technology. Like there were whole camera crews that had to be around everyone with mics and everything, and now technology has advanced quite a bit between the years. So I think probably that enabled more of it, but I don't know. I've never seen anybody talk about that, but I would be curious if they ever have. So I also continued on with my recently started project to watch all of the DC movies in the comic book universe that are now on Netflix. And I watched Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice or something. It was genuinely terrible. I think Jesse Eisenberg was fantastic, and Jeremy Irons was fantastic as Alfred. Everyone else was god-awful. And the whole story and characterization of these well-established characters was just so poor. Like, if you are new here, I read a good amount of comics, but I'm not very into the traditional superhero comics, except for Batman. I actually have read a good amount of Batman canon. I own quite a lot, like, of the comics I own. Batman is basically the only one that I own several comics from. And the Batman in this movie does not align with any Batman characterization I've read. It's so weird. And Ben Affleck is not a good fit, that's for sure. So I watched it. It was a film, and I have watched it. There were certain moments in the action with Batman that were actually cool and fit with his characterization that I liked. But the majority of the action sequences were ridiculous. It was so dumb. So I think the next movie in line is one of the Suicide Squads, and I'm hopeful it will be better. So maybe we're on an upward trajectory from here. But yeah, this was terrible. In life, it was an okay week. It's very low key this weekend, because it was a tough one. I had a really bad arthritis flare up, so I don't know. It's still going a little bit. You can see my hand's a little fat, a little red there, and you can barely tell that I even have joints anymore because it's just a little puffy still. But like Wednesday, I think overnight to Thursday was so bad, so painful. I couldn't sleep all night. I thought I was gonna have to go to urgent care because I was in so much pain. But I finally got it kind of managed, found the right combination of things, and had my splint on, and that was not even really helping. Iced it, all of that stuff. Eventually got there, and then it was like an hour before I had to wake up when I finally started getting some sleep. So I was so tired and miserable. I wound up dozing a little bit in the afternoon when things slowed down a lot, but it was just a tough, challenging week. And perfect timing though, because I had just gotten my my tablet holder for my bed, and that really, really helped to not have to hold the tablet while my hand was hurting so badly and not have to maneuver it. I did, as expected, I projected that. I shouldn't have thrown it out there because I think I jinxed myself. I dropped the tablet on my face. And so I think it's gone, but I had a little tiny bump on my head. And totally my fault. It was completely predictable, but in the dark, I was trying to turn the tablet just a little bit, and instead I was pushing one side and popping it out of the holder. And I knew better. I had already foreseen that was going to be the problem. And yeah, I did it. I was just not paying attention. So I'm trying to pay attention more. But so other than that, I got snowed in at the office a little bit. We had been expecting a snow, but a very small amount, like much under an inch. And so I was planning to, when it started, it dusted a little bit, and I was like, oh, okay, it's probably almost done. So I'm going to go in, wait till it's done, and then come back. And I got on the road, and it like was super cloudy, visibility was low, and it was snowing quite a lot. And I was like, oh, this is quite a bit, worse. The roads were not cleared at all, and it was coming down sufficiently that it was actually concerning to drive. And I saw somebody wreck off in the side of the road and everything, like concerning. But I got into the office, and I was like, okay, well, no big deal. I had some stuff I did have to get done, and I'm there, and it's just dumping down snow, and I'm seeing the cars in the parking lot get covered, people going out to clean their cars, and it just getting covered over again. I was like, oh, this is kind of concerning. So I did end up doing what I had planned on. It just took an awful lot longer for it to snow and stop for me to leave. And by the time it was done, we had about 4 inches of snow, much more than anyone had expected. And so I think that unexpected aspect is what really caused problems. They were not out in force with plows at all because of the expectation being so low. It was supposed to go completely north of us, and it didn't at all. So coming home was also a little iffy, but it was fine. They had already plowed some, and so it was okay, but things were very sort of icy as a result of it having been quite warm the day before, and then the temperature massively dropping over 2 days, basically. And so we had a very, very cold Friday and Saturday, much colder Saturday after it had snowed, all of that dumped on us. And today it's warming up slightly, but still around freezing. So I think it's just going to get warmer from here and all melt right off. But as you can see, the blinding white light is because it's glowing off the snow outside. What else? Oh, this is President's Day weekend, which is lovely for me. I get a nice 3-day weekend in the US, so I'm very much enjoying it, very much keeping it low-key. I have not wanted to do anything at all, but this is the most boring news ever. So my microwave broke about a month ago, and I've been living without a microwave, specifically knowing that President's Day usually has very good appliance sales, and it did. So I have ordered a new microwave to get installed, and I got it for $150 off. So that was very exciting to me that my responsible adult planning worked out, even though I have lived without a microwave for a month. So that will be very nice to have a new microwave. And I basically just got the same model, but the current one that's being made instead of my whatever 10 or 15-year-old microwave that I have. I don't think I have any specific recommendations because I have still been desperately trying to catch up with my watch later list from all of the early start of the year stuff. So I have been, I guess, remiss in commenting on a lot of people's videos. I apologize for the lack of comments. I have been watching and liking everybody's and trying desperately to get dug out of the massive watch later queue. I'm also a little behind on responding to my own comments, but thank you all for the lovely comments on my Q&A recently. That was really, really great. I appreciate it so much, and you guys have really given me a massive boost. So I think that's it for me today. Thank you all so very much for watching.